I work the midnight shift at a gas station by the highway. It's a pretty easy gig. I do have some sketchy characters come in. They don't cause that much trouble, though. Aside from people stealing small items like chips or chocolate bars, the worst thing that had ever happened was people trashing the bathroom. That was until those two showed up. I didn't pay much attention to them when they walked in. My head was down in the middle of a magazine aimed towards girls. I wasn't the type to read such things, but the blurb on the front had enticed me. For hours, the magazine mocked me from the stand across the counter. I finally caved in and flipped to the article. 15 things guys hate in bed. I was expecting a fluff piece, but it was so graphic the entire magazine horrified me. Who writes this crap? I mean, really. I had chills thinking about the fact that these things were so common they had to write an article about it. The bell chimed, saying someone had walked into the store. They had parked their car out front, but they weren't getting gas. I only gave them a glance and let my eyes drift down to the magazine once more. It was impossible not to hear what they were saying as they went to the back to the slush station. "You said we needed supplies," hissed a voice. He sounded very tense. "Snacks are supplies. You have your wallet, right?" The second man had a lighter voice. He was helping himself to a slush drink, and it sounded like he was pouring out every flavor the machine had into one large cup. "We don't have time for this, and why the hell am I paying?" I peeked over my magazine to try and get a look at them. The one sounded so angry I worried he might start a fight soon. The shelves of products made it hard to see them. The annoyed man was shorter than his companion. I couldn't see him because of the chip display. The other was tall enough for me to see that he had pulled back long black hair, and, oddly enough, sunglasses. Anyone wearing glasses at night was either up to no good or was trying too hard to look cool. The taller man gave a dismissive wave and started to go back between the shelves, picking up bags of chips and anything else he fancied. The shorter one followed behind, nearly stomping and fuming. He stayed silent as the other man started to hand him snacks he couldn't carry due to holding a drink. My magazine was forgotten. I watched them while trying not to make it too obvious. They were the oddest pair that had come into the store for months. "You're the one who said we only had until sunrise. Just pick one already." The taller man had stopped in front of the jerky display and spent a few minutes trying to decide between two flavors. The other man couldn't take it any longer and exploded. I really thought a fight was about to happen. I put my magazine down, now not caring if they saw me watching. I stood up, ready to call for backup, or break it up if I thought it was safe. I didn't need to. All fury went out of the man's face when the sunglasses man turned and smiled at him. That was all. Just a smile. It looked like a normal expression, but even I could feel as if something was, well, off about it. He took a step back from his tall companion, arms full of snacks, and looked away. I had never seen someone so culled silently before. I started to wonder just who the hell the taller man was. Scooping up 3 packs of jerky into his hands, they finally made it to the counter. He had already drank half his slushie by the time everything had been set down. Saying nothing, I started to scan the mass of items, while sneaking glances up at the pair. The sunglasses man was still smiling, and unnerved me in a way that was hard to describe. The other man wasn't looking at me. It was so awkward, I was glad when the bell chimed again, and it broke the tension a little. I heard a groan after the tinkering. I smelled the newcomer first. A sharp smell with a hint of rot. I looked over at the door and froze. The bag of chips slipped from my hand, and my body refused to move. The 2 men followed my line of sight. The smile never faded from the taller man's face, but it changed to a stressed one. The other's face turned ghost white. Finally, I was moving, rushing to the door into the person who had just come inside. He was badly injured. His head had a nasty gash with dried blood down his face. His clothing was ruined with dirt and more old blood. He honestly looked and smelled like the dead. But he was stumbling inside, still on his feet. My first reaction was to get him to sit down and see how badly he was hurt. He needed to get to a hospital. "Call an ambulance," I shouted while rushing over to the injured man. My stomach turned at the sight of him. And the smell. How could someone look as bad as he did and was still standing? In my panic, I didn't even consider that the two by the counter might have something to do with the man who had just walked inside. When I was within an arm's reach of the man, my entire body screamed at me to stop. I jerked, my feet planted on the ground, refusing to move. My brain had to catch up to my instincts and figure out why I stopped. The man didn't even notice me. He only looked beyond me with dead eyes. Truly dead eyes. The smell and his eyes were telling me something I just couldn't accept. That he was a corpse. A standing, upright, stumbling corpse. "I asked you to lock him in the car," I heard a sing-song voice of the taller man behind me. "You have the keys. How could I lock him in? Besides, he has a seatbelt on. How the hell can he undo that and open the car door?" The other man sounded shrilled and in a panic. I risked a glance behind me. Mr. Sunglasses still had that smile on his face, but it looked sinister in the artificial light. He noticed me staring. In 3 large strides, he was right behind me. My only other choice was him or the man in front of me. I could not bring myself to walk towards what smelled like a corpse. I felt a strong hand grab the back of my neck, and he lifted me up like a kitten. There was no way this thin man should have been able to just pluck me off my feet like that. He took a sip of his drink and started to walk with me in front. I thrashed and struggled, trying to get free. What the hell's going on?" I demanded while struggling. I only ended up getting tangled in my shirt and looking pretty foolish considering the situation. "Sorry, but we can't have any witnesses." His voice was still kind, but my stomach dropped when the trunk of the car popped open. Before I could struggle free, I was tossed in the trunk and trapped inside. I looked for a latch that would open it and kicked violently at the back seat, praying it would flip open into the car. Nothing I did worked. With some horror, I realized that he must have modified his car to make sure the trunk couldn't be opened from the inside. I bumped against a spare tire and some tools meant to change said tire. I gripped a tire iron, thinking if he opened the trunk again, at least I had a weapon to defend myself. I still kicked and screamed, hoping that someone who pulled into the gas station either saw what happened or heard my screaming and called the police. The gas station did have cameras, but I doubted I would be alive by the time 6 a.m. rolled around and my manager showed up. After what felt like years, the car started and we pulled away onto the road. My heart sank. I truly thought I was going to die. Anyone taken to a secondary location almost always died. Suddenly, the trunk felt too small. I couldn't get air. I had to force myself to calm down and try to figure things out. I had to make a plan. I could only worry about myself in that moment and not what on earth they had done to the other man that made him look like the dead. Grasping a tire iron against my chest, I stared up into the dark, trying to compose myself. From the car, I heard music blaring. Music in a language I didn't know. If the music was that loud, there was no way my kicking and screaming would be heard over it. I was in the trunk of that car, literally scared stiff for over an hour. When you're in that position, an hour feels like your entire lifetime. I had just gotten a little bit under control when I heard an awful noise above the music. The car swerved and I was tossed around the trunk. We stopped moving, the music turned off. I heard muffled voices, but not what they were saying. Without warning, the trunk opened and a light blinded me. I lifted my weapon, only to have it pulled from my hand. I waited, expecting to be forced out and shot. "You know how to change a tire?" "Huh?" I was stressed. Who could blame me for that response? When my eyes adjusted, I saw we were on the side of the road. The short man with a flashlight shining directly at me. The other man looking down at me. When I didn't give him a better answer in a few seconds, he started to close the trunk. "Wait, yes I do." I was pulled from the trunk and my weapon returned to me. I was so confused I didn't even think to use it. If I was useful, maybe, just maybe they would let me go. Under some pretty intense supervision, I looked in the trunk trying to find what I needed for the change. To my great fear and disappointment, I saw there was one tool missing. I don't think I can. We don't have something to get the car lifted so I can roll the new one on. Sweat was stinging my eyes. I was sure the pair was going to kill me, ditch the car, and steal another one. I tightened my hand around the tire iron, thinking when was best to make a stand. To my horror, the tall man walked over to the car, placed one hand under it, and lifted the whole damn thing off the ground. I just stared in stunned silence, not being able to accept what I was seeing. I'm single. Still holding up the car, his face twitched, and I think he was giving a wink under his sunglasses. I was still staring, mouth open, when a hand on my shoulder made me jump. Neff hits on everyone. Just try and deal with them, and I'll do my best to make sure you get back to your job. The short one sounded exhausted. At least I had a name of one of them. Unable to stop myself, I looked between them, utterly confused. Who the hell are you two, and what the hell's going on? Thankfully, they decided to tell me. As I worked at changing the tire, I was told about what I had been caught up in. Murray, the shorter one, owed a lot of money to a lot of bad guys. His friend, who was now rotting in the backseat of the car, won it big. Knowing they both owed a bunch of scary and bad people, he decided to bury his earnings. He thought if no one knew the location, it would keep him alive. However, after burying the loot, he went on a bender and died in a car crash. Now, Murray needed cash to save his life. His dead friend was the only one who knew the location of the life-saving money. Murray went to Neff, hearing he could talk to the dead. He had no idea that this tall, strange man was the real deal. I thought he was a psychic. I don't believe in that nonsense either, but I figured he was the type to do the research beforehand. Pretending he was getting the information from the grave, and maybe I'd see something I missed. I only have 2 days left, so I was desperate, Murray explained. I was pretty shocked when it turned out he could make the corpse point the way to the missing cash. I would imagine something like corpse raising costs a lot. How are you going to pay him when you need to drop off the buried loot to someone else? I was almost done with the new tire and wished it was taking longer. Oh, I don't want money. I told him I would do this if he gave me a corpse, Neff explained, not looking tired for holding up a car for so long. Here, I thought necromancers were the weak type. What do you want a corpse for? The question slipped out. I regretted asking it. I really didn't want to know the answer. Gee, stop with the interrogations over here. Can't a guy have a hobby without getting grilled nonstop about it? Do I ask you what you do in your spare time? Huh? Do I? He was being so dramatic, I rolled my eyes and caught Murray's expression. On top of the stress of dying in 2 days, unless he came up with a bundle of cash, this poor man had to deal with Neff for at least the whole day. I felt for him. Once the task was done, I tried to clean my hands on my uniform pants. The car was in driving condition, and Murray got back into the front seat. The trunk was open again, and I gave the necromancer a desperate look. Really? I pleaded, not wanting to go back inside. If you want to ride in the back seat with a corpse, that's fine. We can put some air fresheners around his neck, but I think it's only making it worse. Or I can get Murray to drive, and you can sit on my lap up front. I willingly crawled into the trunk with those options. It's hard to know how much time passed in the dark. I wondered if I was just losing it. This all couldn't be real, could it? Zombies and necromancers were just fantasy. I decided as long as I lived through the night, I would believe anything until I was safe. When I was let outside again, we had stopped in front of a massive statue of an elephant. I knew what town I was in, but that didn't help me. Your corpse buddy says he buried the loot under the elephant's butt, Neff said, shovel in hand. The corpse had been set loose, but he just shuffled along. He didn't look threatening, after you got past the fact that he was a dead person walking around. There was only one shovel, and Murray took it to start digging. I still can't believe you can bring people back from the dead. Even with him in front of me, I said, but mostly to myself. I can't bring people back. Neff's voice was so somber and out of character for him. I had to look over to make sure it was him talking.
He may be walking around, but he's still dead. The one unwavering truth of this world is humans die, and death is final. There is no bringing them back. Once they're dead, they're dead. No matter how much you desire to see them again, that person's gone. Humans do not come back from the dead. Humans do not live forever. If they did, they are not human.
I heard Murray start digging behind us. I couldn't help but wonder again who Neff was. What in his past made him dabble in a job like trying to raise the dead? I wanted to ask more about him. But when he pulled out a bag of beef jerky, my eyebrow raised. You didn't pay for that, did you? I felt like I was trapped out there for hours. I helped Murray dig, looking for any signs of buried cash, while Neff sat on the car with his pilfered snacks. We only had one shovel, so when Murray got tired, I would take over, thinking it would speed up the process. I was still a little scared for my life, but I also had hope they would just let me go after this was all over. And oddly enough, I thought Murray might be an alright guy. I wanted him to make it out of this alive. When we finally saw a dark object poke out from the dirt, we couldn't help but smile. With one final push of effort, we dug out a hefty duffel bag. Murray had wet eyes when he opened it. I saw stacks of cash inside. He quickly closed the zipper and looked up at me. "Sorry about kidnapping you," he said to me with a small, sheepish smile. I didn't blame him for it. I had seen their zombie friend and they freaked. But after having time to think about it, there was no reason to keep me around. If I told the cops about them, I doubted anyone would believe my story. They would go free, so there was no reason to kill me. Neff took a hold of the shovel, and no alarm bells rang. I thought he was going to put it back into the car. Him and Murray would just drive off, leaving me stranded and alive. I looked up at him, and that fear returned when I saw that sinister smile back on his face, and shovel raised above his head, ready to strike. On reflex, I grabbed Murray, and we stumbled out of the small hole, just as the shovel blade came down. It hit the ground so hard, I was certain that it would have chopped us in half if it hit its mark. I was also annoyed that if Neff was that strong, he could have found the bag much sooner if he helped us. "What the hell's your problem?" Murray shouted, clutching the bag to his chest.
Problem? No problem,
Neff said cheerfully and yanked the shovel from the ground.
I told you if I helped you find the cash, you would give me a corpse.
His bright voice gave me chills. I knew what he was getting at, but Murray was slow at arriving to the same train of thought. "You have one. It's stumbling around over there."
That one? That one? You think I wanted a half-rotted, week-old pile of garbage? No, I need a fresh one. So hold still, I won't make this hurt. One swing, I promise.
He was coming toward us, but I didn't give him the chance. Once again, I grabbed Murray's arm and started to make a run for it. Neff was close behind. He was teasing us. A shrill, insane laugh came from him as he swung the shovel. Each time I felt the breeze from the blade as it narrowly missed us. He didn't care which one of us he killed. Maybe he would take both. I was so stupid thinking I could trust that madman. I looked over my shoulder when I heard the shovel miss us again and get stuck in the elephant's leg. Neff was trying to pry it loose when he looked over at me. Red lights glowed from behind his sunglasses, and his twisted smile was going to be in my nightmares if I lived. I ran. Murray did not. He tripped just as Neff got his shovel loose. Handle bent, but still able to kill. Murray rolled on his back, fear making him freeze up. He still refused to let go of the heavy duffel bag. I cursed myself for going back for him. I had an idea come to me. One that could save us if I was lucky. If I wasn't, I would be dead in the next few seconds. I slid over, putting myself between Neff and Murray. "Wait!" I shouted, one hand up to try and stop the incoming shovel. By some miracle, Neff did stop. A confused smile on his face. "Listen, so Murray has people after him, right? Bad people? What if you just protected him from those people? How many would go after him if they thought he killed a member of theirs and he owed them money? At least a few. More than 3, so killing us right now, you'd be losing out." The air was heavy between us after I spoke. Murray was still on the ground, nearly panting from fear. Neff stood as still as a statue, those horrible red eyes glowing through his glasses directly towards me. I had nearly lost all hope when Neff started to move again. I flinched when he tossed the shovel above our heads. I could have sworn I heard it take out some trees in its path as it flew into the forest surrounding us. I felt strong arms wrap around me, lifting me off the ground. It felt like he was trying to squeeze me to death, but Neff was just hugging me.
Oh, you wonderful human! Such a good idea! How silly of me for not thinking of this.
I was set down and nearly collapsed from stress. Somehow, I had gotten on that monster's good side. Murray looked at me, also stressed, but thankful for my desperate idea. We had to hold on to each other to stay steady enough to walk to the car. About the corpse, Murray said after a few steps, making Neff stop. We all looked at the bumbling zombie who had started all of this. I wondered about that too. What would happen to him? Would we bring him back with us?
What corpse?
As Neff walked by the zombie, he didn't even acknowledge it. In 2 steps, he was in front of it, and the creature suddenly burst into a short-lived flame. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into ash, scattering into the wind. I did not want to ride with them, or sit in the back seat that still smelled like death. I had no choice. And oddly enough, Neff was kind enough to drive me back to work. I suffered through the trip back, listening to music I didn't understand, smelling traces of rotting flesh around me and in fear of my life. I had never been so happy to see a workplace of mine in my life. Neff parked by the pumps and got out. He had taken off his sunglasses and I finally saw his full face for the first time. His eyes were in fact red and unsettling. He nearly ripped off the door when he opened it and grabbed me by the front of my ruined uniform. With one final wink, he very rudely pulled me from the car and tossed me across the lot. I don't think he meant to break my arm when he tossed me. He either didn't know his own strength or didn't know how fragile humans are. The car was speeding off into the night when my manager came out frantic. A regular had seen the state of the store and called him. He had just called the police when I was dropped off. In a few minutes, the place was swarming with red lights, and I didn't have a good story for them. I know the cops are never going to arrest someone for my few hours of being kidnapped. I'm fine with that. I had to quit my job, and I moved across the country to not only get a fresh start, but to get away from what I saw that night. I hope Murray is doing all right. But I never want to know more about that eccentric necromancer I met. If you want to learn more about the eccentric necromancer you just met, there's another story written by the same author. You can find it in the description below or in the first comment. I'll also link it in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen at the very end of the video. Hope you all enjoyed tonight's story, and join me again next time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for more. Thanks again. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.